everyone, and welcome to the Ultimate Job Search and Career Podcast. I am the company's expert, and in today's episode, we're going to talk about, is every job interview passable? Is it possible to pass every single job interview that you come up for? We're going to explore that, and then later on in the episode, we're going to talk about how to conduct a job interview properly. Okay, this is basically the method that I have followed for years, including back when I was a CEO and an executive, and I was hiring people at all levels. And I'm going to give you sort of my take on this, which is a lot better than asking the cliched cookie cutter questions that people today seem to be so obsessed with when you go to a job interview. But before we get there, I just want to invite everyone to subscribe to this channel and to join as a channel member to get extra videos and other things. Because after all, if this is the kind of YouTube channel you like, this is the channel for you. Okay, a few wise words there. Now, let's dive in. Okay, so can you pass every job interview? This is what I know a lot of job seekers are wondering. And the answer is a resounding no. Okay, sometimes it is just not possible for you to pass the interview, often through no fault of your own, okay? The problem is when you walk into the interview, or if you're on a Zoom call, I mean, it starts the second that your camera feed turns on and they can see you sometimes. It starts with the moment they meet you, and they, in the old days, they would shake your hand. A lot of times people don't do that anymore. But from that moment on, you are under scrutiny, and it could be something that they were looking for, which could be in a lot of cases completely out to lunch, and you just don't fit that, or you don't have that. And a lot of times I find, and I know a lot of you guys have found this too, is that a lot of job postings can be deceptive. They say they want one thing, and you have that in spades, and then you go to the interview and they reject you and they say, oh, you don't have that thing, right? So there's a lot of that going on. And the reason why I'm talking about this is because I know a lot of people, a lot of job seekers who go to job interviews, and they are not selected and they don't get a call back. They really internalize a lot of that rejection, and they take it as personal, and it can lead to some psychological issues and even mental health issues. I mean, this is a serious thing that's not really talked about that much. And from my perspective, and from hearing a lot of stories for years from job seekers and from students of mine in university that have tried to get jobs, and they go to interviews and it doesn't work out, they leave with almost like an inferiority complex. And I can understand where they're coming from, because, the rejection stings. And a lot of people think that if I don't pass the interview, it's because I'm not good enough. I didn't measure up in some way, shape, or form. They think I'm no good, and they take it to heart. That's a complete lie. In the vast majority of situations, you know what? I'm not going to even say in the vast majority. I'm going to say in every situation, because the reality is that there's a job out there for every single person. Every single person is suited to a job. The question is, can you connect with that job? Okay, that's the reality. So I'm going to say it. It is not your fault if you don't pass the interview. Okay, a lot of times companies are looking for a specific thing, and you might not have it. A lot of times the job postings are misleading. They say they want something, but they don't really want that thing. This is a major occurrence. How many times have you read a job description where they say a lot of this cliche drivel, where they talk about, we want a team player and we want someone who thinks outside the box and all this kind of baloney. And, you might actually be somebody who is a creative thinker, unlike 3/4 of the world right now that claims that they are creative thinkers and they don't follow the crowd, when in fact 99% of them do. You might actually be a creative thinker. You might actually have these traits. But a lot of times you are interviewed by somebody who couldn't recognize those traits to save their life. And so you don't get it, right? Because say they want something, but when they are presented with that thing, they decide that they don't want it, right? That's a common thing. A lot of times, the person that's making the decision can't recognize talent when they see it. That's a huge reason. You'd be surprised at how often that happens. If you want an example of this or an analog to look to, there are, I don't know what you would describe this as, but I've seen TV shows, videos, clips of famous people, whether they're celebrities or artists or movie stars or musicians or whatever. I've seen clips that show them a few years before they hit the big time, before they were discovered, before it was obvious that they were highly talented. Okay. And the challenge is for you to be able to recognize the talent. Could you spot the talent in that person if you were to watch their screen test or their demo recording or whatever it is, right? Years before they were discovered. And a lot of times you realize how hard that actually is. It's a very big challenge to spot the talent in people. And if some of the best people in the business, put it this way, in the business of spotting talent, couldn't do it, I would say, what chance does the typical recruiter or hiring manager have? They're probably even worse at this than people who are, whose job it is to spot talent, and they have millions of dollars riding on their decisions, right? So that's another big reason. A lot of times people can't spot talent. And let me tell you, it doesn't help that they ask the standard cookie cutter questions in order to try and observe your talent, to find out who you are. It's very limiting to really see who somebody is when all they do is they ask you, tell me about yourself. Why should we hire you? Why do you want this job? Tell me about this work gap on your resume. Do you have any questions for us? And what's your greatest weakness? It's really hard to really get a feel for who somebody is. What they're doing with those questions is they're doing a modern form of heuristics where they're trying to, in the most compact way possible, get the most superficial overview of who somebody is. And they then make their judgment on a series of arbitrary assumptions. That's kind of how that works. So that's another problem with it, and then finally, there's other elements, like, for example, it is certainly possible for somebody to be highly talented. They have a lot of technical skills, and they also have a lot of people skills. Okay, so maybe they're very charismatic, they're friendly, they're easy to deal with, they're easy to work with, they can communicate very clearly, they can be relied upon, they're punctual, like et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. They have all those, but yet at the same time, they tend not to make a great first impression. Making a first impression is a separate issue from having great soft skills. That's something that I've learned working with many talented people over the years. There are some incredibly talented people, and I'm not just talking technical skills. I'm talking in their people skills, their personal interaction skills, and their collaboration skills. Everybody wants to work with them. Everybody loves working with them. They are considered one of the best employees around. But yet, when I think back to my first meeting with them or my first encounter, they did not leave me with a great first impression. First impressions are often wrong, and I can certainly attest to that. I'm sure you guys can too. So that's another isolated incident that works against you in the standard job interview with the recruiter, where it's a form of speed dating. They're like taking, an hour to get to know someone. And in an hour, especially when you don't really, you're not having a natural interaction, you're not having a free-flowing conversation, it's an interrogation where they get to pick the questions, it's hard for them to really get an insight into you. It just is. And a lot of times, interviewers ask the stupidest questions, So that's the deal. Not to mention the fact that one of my personal pet peeves is that if you happen to be a technical type person, a detail-oriented person, one of the reasons why job interviews are so intimidating is because the standard questions they ask are so general that it leaves one speechless with how to begin to answer them. Like something like, tell me about yourself. Now, obviously, in a job interview, any reasonably intelligent person picking up on context clues can tell that there's definitely a right answer and a wrong answer to that question, right? They wouldn't ask the question if whatever you said was fine, right? There would be no point in asking that type of question. The purpose of a job interview is to filter people out who is a great candidate and who is less of a great candidate, right? So everything they ask in the interview, its purpose is to reveal something that they then use to make a judgment about you. Do you move on to the next stage or not, right? So something like, tell me about yourself. If you've never been prepped for a job interview, and if you're a technical type person, and they ask you that question, that can be very confusing to a certain type of person because it's just not specific enough. It's like, what exactly do you want to know? Do you want to know my blood type? Is that why you're asking it? Do you want to know my vital statistics, when I was born and how tall I am? Do you want to know what my passions are? Do you want to know what my work history is? Do you want to know my family history? Do you want me to tell you my ambition or my hobbies? What are you looking for? Right? So for all these reasons and more, okay, you're put in a situation that can easily be a no-win situation. And I'm not saying this to bring everybody down as kind of a depressing point. I'm saying this because if they don't select you, that is not a signal that you are unemployable or you're not valuable. Quite the contrary. Okay, a lot of times job interviews and their decisions have more to say about the interviewers and the decision makers and the organization than they do about the candidates. Now, you still don't believe me on this? Let's look at something else. Look at I'm sure, a common situation that most of you guys could probably relate to, and that is you interview for a job and it goes terrible. They really don't like you. They think you're a non-starter, so they don't hire you. Then you go for another job interview at a different organization and they think you're great and they hire you and they think, oh, this is the best person for this job, right? Now, how could two different people come to completely different conclusions about the same thing? You. How could they do that? Well, it's because obviously they are making the decision different ways. It says more about them than it says about you, right? If you're looking at the results of a job interview to determine if you have value or not, that experience would be contradictory. One person says, we're not hiring you. The other one says, yes, we're definitely hiring you. I mean, that's contradictory results. It is not about you. It is about them. They're revealing their thought processes. They're revealing their value system by the decisions they make. Now, I was consciously aware of this when I was running an organization and I was assisting other people run an organization. This is something everybody clearly sees when you're at like a little bit of a higher level where you're a decision maker. This was common knowledge. And it depends on many things. It depends on, your business strategy. It depends on your corporate culture. But more than that, it depends on your personality and your personal beliefs about what you place value on. Okay? That's the reality. So, where does this leave us? As far as I'm concerned, this leaves us with the clear message that not every job interview is passable. But this is a good thing because it's not about you. It's about them. And There are a lot of bad employers out there. I hear horror stories about them every day. I hear horror stories about how they treat people. I hear horror stories about how they hire people. I hear horror stories about how they handle every part of your enjoyment, your employment journey, from the moment you're recruited to your last contact with that organization in your life. Okay, there are many bad employers out there. There's many good ones, but there's many bad ones, that's for sure. And it's no surprise that these people don't have a particularly effective recruitment and selection process. So that's what I'll say. So if you have been rejected by for a job lately, you've been to an interview and they haven't called you back, don't feel bad. Don't worry about it, and don't take it to heart. You are highly employable, you are highly talented, and highly valuable, and there is a place out there where you belong, in a work environment that you will thrive in, okay? It's just a matter of connecting to it. Now, that's kind of our first topic for today. So is every job interview passable? No. Another thing I want to talk about, because not many people have asked me about this, but it's kind of like the source of a lot of the answers I give for other specific questions, which is, how would you do a job interview properly? And if you have watched my videos, if you've checked out my channel and seen a lot of my videos that are on there, you would probably have picked up on the fact that I'm a little bit unconventional when it comes to the recruitment and selection process. And what I mean by that is that I don't just toe the party line that a lot of recruiters and hiring managers do, especially recruiters. I'm not knocking recruiters. Out there are some incredible recruiters, people that are experts on assessing other people. They work in recruitment and selection. Usually they work in executive search, true executive search, and they are absolute masters of what they do. So I'm not necessarily knocking recruiters. However, I will say that being said, there are a hell of a lot of bad recruiters out there that have no business making judgments about anybody, let alone deciding who is allowed to enter an organization as an employee. I would say that they have a hell of a lot of responsibility. I would even go so far as to say that the success of an organization ultimately depends on the people, and who decides on what people you allow in the door. In a lot of cases, it's HR. They might not have final say for every decision, but they certainly lead off the process and draw up the short list of candidates. So yeah, it's a hell of a responsibility. I also find it ironic that a lot of people who work in HR have never worked in any other area besides HR. So if an HR, if a recruiter is hiring for an accounting position or an engineering position or a management position, not to come down too hard on them, but how would they know who would make a good accountant or a good engineer or a good manager? They think they know, but they don't. And if you want proof of that, look at a lot of true executive hiring firms, and you look at the people that are actually making decisions on, who to hire as CEO and who to hire as, CFO and all this kind of stuff. And they're not pure recruiters, I can tell you that. They're usually executives themselves, people that have done the job, but have also specialized in HR and have tacked on that training and have had years in it. So that really is telling. Okay, so how to conduct a job interview properly. Here's my take on this, and here's what I used to do, okay? Unlike the sort of conventional default thing that you read about on the internet and you read articles from recruiters talking about, I never would ask those insulting, cliched questions. Things like, tell me about yourself, things like, why should I hire you? Not only are they borderline insulting, I find, but they're honestly useless. They really are. I mean, I've taught recruiters how to recruit, and I know the standard kind of thing that you do, but I find they're ineffective. This is evidenced by the how employee turnover rates have gone up and steadily over the last 20, 30 years. They're making worse and worse decisions, and then they're treating people badly too. So the way I would do job interviews, I'd essentially have a conversation, and it starts with the setting. Okay. If you want to see somebody who's being real, who's being true, who is not putting on a facade, and they are not managing their interaction with you in an extreme way, it starts with the setting. And what I would do, I know this is a bit unconventional, but what I would do is I would not have job interviews in a conference room on our property. I would take people out to lunch. Now, right off the hop, that would be a little bit of a test, because when you called back a candidate, in most cases I wouldn't call them back, it would be scheduled, but it would be like, okay, we're going to meet here, and it's not on company property. It's like a Starbucks, or it's a restaurant, or something like that. It's a neutral place. That's how I used to do this, because people are not at ease. If you're meeting somebody in their office and they're sitting on one side of their desk and you're sitting on the other side of the desk, and usually they have a giant chair, so they're 2 feet up in the air, and the candidate's sitting in a tiny chair. They're like, a foot off the floor. It's totally artificial. You're not going to get a natural interaction with the other person. They're going to be nervous. They feel a sense of formality. They're not going to really be themselves. They're going to be a very rehearsed, safe, managed version of themselves, and you're not really going to get a glimpse into who they are. Okay? Now, obviously, I'm talking about, you've already made sure somebody has, the standard technical skills for a job. Okay, if the job requires a qualification, they have the qualification. I'm talking about making selections between people, assessing who they are as people, assessing their personality, assessing their fit. That's what I'm talking about here. Okay. And hopefully everybody knows that a lot of times when companies in a job posting say that these technical skills are required, they're essential, a lot of times they're not. Maybe a couple of items on that list might be absolutely essential. They're deal breakers if you don't have them. But a lot of things can be overlooked if they like you. It's just that simple. If you have the right passion, you get along great, and you click as people, they can overlook not technically having all of the supposed, essential requirements. And we see that every day. You don't have to take my word for that. You can, almost every person probably can tell a story about that. So it starts with the setting. I wouldn't have it in an office, wouldn't have it on property. We'd go out, have a coffee, or have, a lunch. Okay. You'd only do the lunch thing if it was like a final round interview, it was serious and it was for something important. But a lot of times I just want to grab a coffee or something. The key thing is that you're in a neutral place, and people tend to relax more. It tends to be more of a pleasant conversation among two professionals rather than a formal job interview. And, remember, your entire life is hanging in the balance. So diffuse it, make it informal, make people relaxed, gives you a higher chance of seeing the true person. Then what I do is I don't use standard job interview questions. I feel that doesn't work because it's a completely artificial interaction. Okay. And instead, what I would do is I would have access to the person's resume. I would read a couple of points off their resume before the meeting takes place. And I'd have a basic idea of who they are, or at least their work history. And I would start off by asking them about one of their previous jobs, either their most recent one or the first one they ever had, or anything in between, whatever is the most interesting, whatever I remember that caught my attention off their resume. I would start with that. And I would try to get a two-way conversation going where 75% of the time they're talking, at least 75% of the time they're talking, and maybe 10 to 25% of the time I'm talking. And the purpose of me talking is to give them things to react to. Okay. For example, I'd say like, well, I've always found that, in this situation, a lot of things indicate that this particular handling is the best thing to do, but I'm not really sure about that. What's your take on it? Have you ever encountered that before? Something like this. So it would be food for a conversation. It would be material to spark discussion. And what I would do is I'd ask them a series of questions, interrupted occasionally by me giving, my take on things or my opinion, or throwing out, an opinion or a concept or a story or whatever. And they would react to it. And I just get their reaction. And after, what I found was the first hour of conversation, usually you can throw it away because people are still guarded. They're still not being natural. You're not really seeing the true them. Okay. After an hour, sometimes even up to an hour and a half of conversation, that's when you start seeing the person behind the mask. You're getting a glimpse into who they really are. And you're seeing a preview of how you would work with them. What would the nature of the interaction be like? Okay. Do they clash with you on their opinions in key areas? Do they have enough knowledge in certain areas? Do they have kind of some strange opinions or strange, experiences that have kind of led them to do things substantially different from the way you do? Now, I'm not saying, this like one is right and one is wrong, but what I am saying is that you're really getting to know them. And if you have to work with these people, if the person you're hiring is someone that you're going to have to work with directly, this is absolutely invaluable, experiences. You can see exactly what you're getting. Okay. It's a preview of who that person is. You break down the guard, you break down this element of formality, and you can really get a sense of who they are. And sometimes it's very positive, and sometimes it's not that positive. It's okay. It's workable. I've never had really negative experiences, but I've had, more positive and, less positive experiences. Is dealing with them annoying? Is dealing with them kind of questionable? They kind of say things that are like, what? I don't believe that. You find this out now. It is the polar opposite, as far as I'm concerned, to a lot of job interview advice that recruiters and some people give out, where they get you to spout these canned answers. And, what is the point of that? The fact that somebody can go to a job interview and fail it, but then go to a second job interview that's practically the same, and after some training of how to answer questions, pass it, that's kind of a statement of how ineffective the whole process is. It's basically testing people on how well they interview rather than, what kind of an employee are they. So that's basically my take on it. And if you're wondering, the reason why I do videos on how to pass a lot of job interview questions is because I realize the fakeness of it, and I realize how these people think. I know how they think, and what they're looking for, and how they take certain things, the assumptions they make, and how they react to different answers. So that forms the basis of what I recommend in my more popular videos, which are, answering job interview questions. So that's how I do things. I mean, I could go on forever, but that's the bottom line. Now, if you are a job seeker, hopefully you will experience this type of interview at some point, hopefully soon, because they tend to be very positive. If you get a job through networking, the odds are higher that you will get this type of interview. It'll be more of a sort of conversation with almost a friend, someone who's just trying to get to know you, and they're also getting you to know them and seeing your reaction to it, and it's a mutually made decision. Do I want to work with you, and do you want to work with me? Because if you don't want to work with me, I mean, then it's a non-starter, I mean, how many times have people been burned on a job interview where you go to an interview and you pass and you think like, wow, this company is great. And then you start your job and the illusion is immediately shattered. This is actually a terrible place to work. These people are horrible. How often has that happened? That happens a lot. So anyway, I hope this was somewhat helpful. I'm interested to hear your thoughts and your reactions to this. Let me know if you've experienced this type of interview. And if you never have, check out using networking to get a job, because you will have a higher chance of having these types of interviews. They're much more pleasant. And even if it doesn't work out, you tend to not carry away as much psychological turmoil and inferiority complexes. Is it complexes? Complexes? As conventional job interviews. So let me know in the comments what you think. Thank you so much for listening this long. Check out my courses. I got my Get Hired course that will help you get a job if you are running into obstacles and headwinds doing that. Other than that, thank you so much, and I will hopefully see you on the next episode. Take care.